All right, so have you ever wondered how do you get those colors from your screen to actually match what comes out of your printer?
Yeah,
Feels like a total guessing game sometimes, right?
it really is.
Yeah. And so today we're going to take a deep dive into color profiling, specifically for printing. We're using insights from the Flexi Complete Training Manual, which is a resource for folks using the Flexi printing software.
Right.
But no worries, if you're not a Flexi Pro, we'll make sure everything's clear.
Absolutely. It's something that a lot of people struggle with is just getting those colors to line up consistently.
Right.
And the manual is definitely geared towards a professional audience, but the principles apply no matter if you're using, top of the line software or you're doing something a bit more DIY.
Okay, so one of the things that jumped out at me when I was looking at the manual was the idea of soft proofing.
Yeah.
So instead of just crossing your fingers and hitting print, you can actually preview on your monitor how those colors are going to look on paper.
Right.
What's the magic behind that?
So soft proofing relies on something called color profiles, or also referred to as ICC profiles. These profiles are essentially custom maps for how a specific device like your monitor or your printer reproduces colors.
So it's not like a universal red is red situation.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Different devices have different capabilities and limitations when it comes to displaying and printing color. And so an ICC profile takes those variations into account.
Gotcha. So if I'm understanding correctly, the soft proofing tool is using these ICC profiles to basically simulate what my printer is going to do with the colors in my design file.
Exactly. It's like a dress rehearsal for your print job.
Okay.
It lets you spot any potential color mismatches before you actually commit to printing, which saves you a lot of time, a lot of materials, and a lot of frustration.
I can see how this could be a huge game changer.
Right.
Now, the manual also mentions these things called device link profiles.
Yes.
What makes those different?
So a device link profile creates a direct connection between your design software's color space and your printer's color space. It bypasses the usual translation that happens when you're relying on separate profiles for your monitor and your printer.
So it's like cutting out the middleman. There's less room for error.
Exactly. It's like having a dedicated communication line between your design and the final output. You're minimizing the chances of colors getting lost in translation.
So how do I even know what ICC profile to use? There must be tons of them out there.
You're absolutely right. Choosing the correct profile is really essential, and working with your printer and ink provider is often the best way to make sure that you're using the optimal profile for your setup. They can usually provide you with the most up-to-date and accurate profiles that are tailored to your equipment and materials.
Okay, so it sounds like getting those profiles right is step one in this whole color accuracy game.
Absolutely.
And one thing I have to ask, because it caught my eye in the manual, is that you can actually create your own custom color profiles. That sounds pretty advanced.
You can. It involves using a device called a colorimeter to measure color values, and then using software like Flexi to generate a custom profile.
Wow.
So it's an option for folks who want to kind of dive deep into color management, but it does require a good understanding of color theory and some specialized equipment.
So for most people who are just getting started with this stuff, it's probably best to stick with the professionally created profiles from their printer and ink provider.
Yes, absolutely, especially if you're looking for consistent, reliable results.
Right.
Starting with those expert-made profiles is really the way to go.
They've already done the heavy lifting.
Exactly. They've done the heavy lifting. They've done all the calibrating.
Okay, cool. So it's kind of like this. Soft proofing is giving you that sneak peek before you print,
right?
Oh. And that relies on these ICC profiles, which are custom instructions for your printer.
Exactly.
And then you can create your own, but if you're just starting out, you're probably better off with the pro-made ones.
Yeah. And there's also another layer to this. The manual kind of briefly touches on the importance of viewing conditions for your prints as well.
Like where the final print is going to be displayed.
Exactly. So think about it. Daylight versus indoor lighting can significantly impact how we perceive colors.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So a print that looks absolutely perfect under your studio lights might look completely different when it's hung in a gallery that has different lighting.
Right.
So
even if you nail the printing process, the environment where it ends up makes a huge difference.
It makes a huge difference. The manual even suggests using something called a viewing booth with standardized lighting to evaluate color accuracy. And this helps to minimize kind of the variability of ambient lighting conditions.
Wow, I had no idea that there were so many different factors at play. This is really making me rethink my whole approach to color.
Yeah, and that's what's so fascinating about color management. It's not just about the technical know-how, it's about understanding how the technology, the materials, and even our own perception all interact to create that final visual experience.
It's true. It's true. But let's dive a little deeper into those ICC profiles and what they actually mean, like what goes into them.
Yeah, let's unpack that a bit more.
Okay, we'll be back after a quick break to really break down those color profiles.
That's good.
Okay, so we're back, and we're going to kind of unpack these ICC profiles a bit more. I'm starting to get how important they are for getting like accurate color. But what exactly is in these profiles? What makes them tick?
It's kind of like a recipe, but for color. So an ICC profile contains information about how a specific device translates colors.
Okay.
So it takes into account things like the device's color gamut, which is basically the range of colors that it can reproduce,
Right.
as well as its own unique characteristics, like how it handles different shades and tones.
So it's not just about telling the printer this is red. It's telling it how to make that specific shade of red with the inks and paper it has.
Exactly, precisely. It's all about mapping the colors from your design file to the colors that the printer can physically produce and making sure it's the closest possible match.
Now, the manual mentions different types of ICC profiles, like RGB and CMYK. What's the difference?
That's a really important distinction. So RGB, which stands for red, green, blue, that's the color model that's used for screens and digital displays.
Okay.
CMYK, which stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and key, which is black, that's the model that's used for printing. And they have different color gamuts, meaning they can represent different ranges of colors.
So RGB profile for my monitor, CMYK profile for my printer.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this is where things can get a bit tricky because what you see on your screen in RGB might not be fully reproducible in CMYK.
Right.
That's why soft proofing with the correct CMYK profile is so important because it shows you how those colors will translate from that RGB world of your screen to the CMYK world of your printer.
Okay, so that's why sometimes things look amazing on screen, but then when you print them, the colors are just kind of dull.
Exactly. It's a color space mismatch.
It's a mismatch. Okay.
Yeah. And so understanding these different color models and how they relate to ICC profiles is absolutely crucial for accurate color printing. But, let's go back to this Flexi Complete training manual for a minute.
Yeah.
Besides all the technical stuff about color management, it also talks about some practical things about using the Flexi software, especially when it comes to choosing the right file formats for your print jobs.
Right. I was looking back through my notes, and it's easy to get overwhelmed by all the different types of files out there. PDFs, EPS files, JPEGs, all those. What stood out to you in terms of file formats and how they work with printing in Flexi?
Well, the manual is really clear that PDFs and EPS files are kind of the gold standard, right?
Yeah.
They really preserve the integrity of your designs, especially when it comes to vector graphics. And vector graphics are those that are commonly used for things like logos and illustrations.
So if I want those crisp lines and sharp details, I should stick with PDF and EPS files.
Exactly. Because those formats retain the mathematical formulas that define those vector shapes.
Okay.
That ensures that they stay nice and sharp even when you scale them up to larger sizes for printing.
Gotcha. No more blurry logos. What about JPEGs? Are those okay to use for printing? I feel like those are everywhere.
JPEGs you have to be a little careful with.
Okay.
While they're great for sharing photos online, they use what's called a lossy compression method,
Okay.
meaning some of the image data is actually sacrificed to reduce the file size.
So that's why sometimes they look a little blocky or pixelated, especially if you zoom in.
Exactly. And the compression can lead to a loss of detail, which is something you definitely want to avoid when you're doing professional printing.
Right, of course.
Flexi's pretty versatile, though. You can use a bunch of different file formats. But it's always a good idea to check that manual's compatibility chart to make sure you're using the best format for your specific project.
It's like having a cheat sheet for file types.
Yeah.
Speaking of cheats, the manual also mentions color trapping, which sounds kind of intimidating, but I'm curious. What is that?
Color trapping is a technique that's used to compensate for slight misalignments that can occur during printing, especially when you're dealing with multiple colors. So basically, it involves creating these tiny overlaps between adjacent colors to prevent these little gaps or white lines from showing through.
So it's like an insurance policy against things going wrong.
Yeah, exactly. It just ensures that your colors blend seamlessly and you have a really polished, professional look.
I'm realizing there is so much that goes into getting colors to print correctly. It's not just about the design itself. There's all this technical stuff.
Absolutely.
But this Flexi Complete training manual doesn't stop there. It even goes into how to manage those print jobs using Flexi's Production Manager. What can you tell us about that?
So Production Manager is like the command center for your entire print workflow.
Okay.
It helps you to organize all your files, it optimizes layouts for the most efficient printing, and it can even automate certain tasks.
Wow.
It's really where the rubber meets the road in terms of taking those designs from the digital world into the physical world.
So it takes all those color profiles, file formats, design choices, and makes sure they're all translated accurately into the final print.
Exactly. It's all about streamlining the production process and making sure that your vision as a designer is realized with precision and consistency.
This is really blowing my mind.
Yeah.
There's a whole world of color management and printing expertise that I was totally unaware of. To think that it's all laid out in this Flexi Complete training manual, it's like a secret weapon.
It is.
For anyone who wants to take control of their printing.
Absolutely.
Speaking of control, the manual gets into some features that give you even more control over those print jobs, right?
All right, let's take a closer look at some of those.
We're back, and I am still thinking about all this stuff about color we've been talking about. This Flexi Complete training manual is really amazing. You were talking about Production Manager, and I want to hear more about those features you mentioned that give you even more control over the print jobs.
Yeah. One of the really cool features that the manual talks about is called nesting, and it's all about maximizing efficiency by arranging multiple designs on your print area in a way that minimizes waste.
So it's like a big game of Tetris with print layouts.
Exactly like that. Production Manager's nesting capabilities let you really strategically position those designs to get the most out of your media, whether you're working with vinyl, banner material, or whatever you're printing on. And it can even rotate the designs to find the most space-saving arrangement.
Oh, wow, that's smart. So you're saving money on materials and being more efficient.
Absolutely.
That reminds me, the manual also talks about setting up multiple queues in Production Manager. What's the advantage of that?
Multiple queues are fantastic if you want to streamline your workflow, especially if you're switching between different print jobs that need different settings.
Right.
So let's say you're printing stickers 1 minute, and then you're switching to large banners the next. You can create separate queues for each type of job that are already pre-configured with the right settings for the material, the resolution, all those specific parameters.
Oh, so it's like having custom settings for each different thing you're working on.
Exactly. Presets for your printer. Instead of manually adjusting all those settings every time you switch jobs, you just pick the right queue and you're good to go. It saves so much time and hassle.
I had no idea that there was so much to printing. It's not just like click print and hope for the best.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it.
There's so much more to it. It feels like you can have so much control and be really precise.
And that's the cool thing about color management when it's done right. You really are taking control of the entire process from start to finish. You're not at the mercy of your printer anymore. You know, you're making choices that lead to good results, high quality output.
Yeah, it's like you can speak the language of your printer, understand all its quirks, and get it to do exactly what you want.
Yes, exactly. And that's what this Flexi Complete training manual, even though it's specifically for the Flexi software, really highlights. It gives you a deeper understanding of how color management works and how you can use it to get professional level results.
It feels like we've been on a journey together, uncovering all the secrets of color. We started with this mystery of colors not matching, and now we know about color profiles and file formats and even production workflows.
It's been a real deep dive.
Yeah, it has.
And I hope you've gotten a new appreciation for how much work goes into making great color prints.
Absolutely. It's been so interesting. I've learned so much.
It's great.
I didn't realize that there was so much more to learn. Even something like printing can be so complex.
And as you continue on with your own printing journey, just remember that getting those colors perfect is an ongoing process. You're always experimenting, learning, and getting better.
That's so true. And to all our listeners out there, keep those colors bright, those prints sharp, and never stop learning about color management. Until next time, happy printing, everyone.